Okay, let's bring up, hold on, let's go into the live and YouTube. Okay, and now we're going to bring up the text of this Farbrengen we're learning this week. Hold on, here we go. Okay, so we're learning a Farbrengen from Parshas Shemos, which is this week's Parsha. That year was Mevarchim, it was blessing the month of Shvat, which usually it would be. This year, it works out that it's not Shabbos Mevarchim Shvat. We bless the new month of Shvat next week. And this was the year of Tafshin Tazayin, which is safe to say in the year 1956. So the Rebbe starts like this. In Parsha Seinu, in this week's Parsha, Metzinu Shnei Inyanim Havchim. We find two opposite ideas. Haschalas Shibud Mitzrayim, the idea of the beginning of the enslavement in Egypt, V'agdamas harafuah lamaka, and we also find that there was the refuah, there was the cure before the makkah is the pain, or before the blemish, so to say. Nechad Gisa, what does this mean? From one side we see, hello Reb Shimon, Maschel Parshas Asipar Derech Hashibud B'nei Yisrael B'Galut Mitzrayim. We start the Parsha learning about how the Jewish people found themselves or were taken slowly into a situation of enslavement. Like it says in the verse, Vayavidu Mitzrayim es B'nei Yisrael B'farach. I mean, no leaving room for interpretation. The Egyptians enslaved and worked the Jewish people with intense labor. Kloimer, meaning to say, Gam Parshas Shifnei Zeh Mesupar Kfar Oidis Ma'amadam Matzavim Shel B'nei Yisrael. We've already learned about in the previous parshas of Vayigash and Vayechi, and even in the beginning from Yosef and Vayeshev, of the eventual how the Jewish people left Eretz Canaan, which is known as Eretz Yisrael, and made their way to Eretz Mitzrayim. That those years, the years that they initially came to Egypt, were good years. So much so that it says that Yaakov's 17 best years of his life, the best years of Yaakov's life, were the 17 years he lived in Egypt. So those were good years. I mean, the idea that the Jewish people were in Egypt is not new, but the idea was it's the enslavement that changed. Kidua Kfar Nitfas, as is known and is publicized, and we learned last week, Divri Admar Azokin, what the Alter Rebbe said, Latzamach Tzedek, to his grandson when he was a child, Shagam Mitzrayim, that idea was that even in Mitzrayim, especially because Yehuda opened up a yeshiva, there was the concept of Vaychi. Yaakov lived; they were alive in Egypt. As an idea is as known, as will be explained. Shebinyan Galus yesh inyan shel toiv v'ilui she'ev shelav elav kima. Sorry, Shebinyan Galus. Then there's, as will be explained, then the idea of Galus yesh inyan shel toiv v'ilui. There's something positive and an elevation. She'ev shelav elav ki im aidei Galus dafka. There's something that we could achieve that's good, and that's why the first years of Yaakov's lives the first years of the Jewish people's lives in Egypt was Toiv, the 17 years that Yaakov lived, because there's something good that could only be achieved through Galus. There's no other way. It's an amazing thing the Rebbe says, that because there's something to be achieved in Galus, and we're going to see what that is in a second, so it expressed itself right away in Yaakov's first years there, that his best years were there, although that's going to lead to the bad of Galus, but the higher purpose of Galus, the good, that could only be achieved through Galus, it expresses itself in the initial days of the time of the Jewish people in Mitzrayim, when Yaakov's best years were in Mitzrayim. They were able to physically feel, not just an idea of the ruchnius or the spiritual, but even in the gashmius, in the physical sense, Yaakov's best years were in Mitzrayim. And because of that, the beginning, all we felt was the positive of Mitzrayim. We didn't see the negative. That's in Vayigash and Vayechi. That's last week and 2 weeks ago. This week, now we start to learn about the Galus itself and the shibud of the Galus, the enslavement of it. Like the verse says, there's a new king in town, a new sheriff in town. Now he has new rules and new decrees. After the passing of Yosef, his brothers, and that generation. As long as one of the brothers were alive, we know, I think, that Levi was the one who lived the longest. Even more so in the life of Yaakov, like we learned in last week, we spoke in the Parsha class, that the idea of Galus came in layers. There was no enslavement as long as Yosef and the brothers were alive. On the other side, so then, on the same time that although we start learning about the shibud, about the enslavement, but before there's this new king, before everything starts to go bad in the way of physical way of the enslavement, the Torah tells us, B'nai Yisrael paro v'yishasu v'yirbu v'yatzmu v'm'oid ma'oid v'atimallah ha'aretz oisam. The Torah tells us that the Jewish people were fruitful and multiplied and spread out in an abundance all over the land of Egypt. She'inin zahu b'chinas hagdama refu l'maka. The Rebbe is talking about the idea that both the idea of Yaakov, the idea of the Tov, and even the idea of how the Jewish people found roots in Egypt, is the concept of a refuah before the makkah, where there's the solution. Refuah means the healing, but also the solution is usually put into place before the bad news comes. And the refuah, therefore, when it's time for the refuah to kick in, for the medicine to kick in, like for instance, they say there's no disease without having a concept of medicine available. But not always do we know what the medicine is. But there's always a refuah, there's a remedy before the pain. And the idea of having this refuah, and it showed itself in the good years of Yaakov, and it showed itself in the idea of how the Jewish people strengthened and multiplied in Egypt before the shibud, before the enslavement, is what gave the Jewish people the ability to get through the Galus. The Rebbe continues, Yavdu chas v'shalom b'galus. They shouldn't get lost, not physically, not emotionally, no yiush, no giving up in the galus. V'adrab, on the contrary, sheinatzlu es galus mitzrayim, that they should take advantage of this galus. Because through the galus of Mitzrayim is what allowed and what prepared the Jewish people to be able to receive the Torah. Like Moshe was told by Hashem, when you take out the people Mitzrayim, from the land of Egypt, to Avdunas Alikim al Harazah. This is the God tells Moshe, you're going to serve God on the mountain. That's the Har Sinai. Harazah Nasa, and that only happened. Shebegalas Mitzrayim Gufa Hoisan Haga in Bnei Yisrael Ba'ifin Shlemal Mateva. Is the refuah, that the fact that there was the refuah there, that although they were in Galus, and logically they shouldn't have survived the Galus 210 years, but the idea that they were able to receive the Torah, which the idea of the Torah itself is beyond the limitations of nature, that the Torah could penetrate and be brought down to the world. So too, Haga, the way God was with the Jewish people, although you had to find it, but nevertheless, if you analyzed it, you would see that Shlemayla Meteva was beyond nature. Paru v'yishusu v'yibru v'yatzmu moed moed, the idea that you were able to have this abundance of building a nation so fast, from 70 people to become, that if you're going to look at it, that you count the numbers, that in 210 years, 1/5, if you go according to the Chamushim, that only 1/5 went out of males between the age of 20 and 60 for 600,000, goes to show you that the Jewish people multiplied quite fast over 210 years. And that's miraculous, the Rebbe says, not natural. And including in this is also this beyond nature, supernatural idea with regard to the children. That they themselves were born in Egypt. Like it says in the Medrash, brings down. God, this is the Medrash talking about that the children, the children who recognized God when they went through the splitting of the Red Sea. What does it mean they recognized God? Because they remembered God. How did they remember God? Because the parents left them in the fields. They didn't want the Egyptians to throw them into the Nile. So God came and he fed them with oil and with dvash, with honey. Like it says, Vayinikeu dvash misela v'shemen, that from the rocks came oil and honey. That's why the Jewish children were the ones who identified Hashem first. Bisman Kriyas Yamsuf at the splitting of the Red Sea, because they remembered that Hashem fed them. But you have to remember something else. The Rebbe talks in another talk that the Hem Hekiru Tchila is not talking about the children as they walk through the sea, because we know that this decree of throwing this firstborn into the Nile was only around the birth of Moshe. So we're talking about the generation that were born when Moshe was born. The time they walked through the Dead Sea, they were older. They were 80-year-olds, right? Moshe was 80 when he left Egypt. But they were children when they were born, they saw Hashem. Is they were adults that went through the splitting of the Red Sea. They recognized this is the God that fed us when we were children in the deserted in the fields. It's not just that there was children, but the world filled. The Egypt was filled with the children, the Jewish children. Egypt was full of Jewish children. Iberful mit Eden was overflowed with Jews. The Rebbe says it's so much that they weren't even isolated to the areas of Goshen. They moved and they spread and they lived all over Egypt. There wasn't a place in Egypt, the Rebbe said. Didn't have a settlement of Jews or wasn't infiltrated by Jews that were living in Egypt. In any part of Egypt, they spread all over. The Rebbe says we'd like to add. Why does it say that the Jewish people multiplied and spread out very, very much? Ma'od means very, very much. This is based on the teaching that the Rebbe quotes many times from the Kutei Torah. When it comes to the conversation that the Jewish people, after the spies, are following and falling for the narrative of the spies that Eretz Yisrael is a bad place, we don't want to go. So Yekalev says, Toiva Aretz Ma'od Ma'od. The land is very, very good. So what's the Ma'od Ma'od? What's the Alter Rebbe explains? Why does Yekalev have to say Eretz Yisrael is very, very good? Just say it's good. One time Ma'od. Shebeis Pa'amim Ma'od Heim Kineged Alman Stimin V'Lo Yiskalin V'Amd Yiskalin. There's the hidden worlds and the revealed worlds. That it's good both in the hidden worlds and in the revealed worlds. How you read this, the Galus Mitzrayim Yared Yaradnu. The fact that it says Ma'od Ma'od, which is the hidden worlds, the things that we don't see, and the revealed worlds. So therefore, the Jewish people were able to survive the double descent, because the verse says Yared Yaradnu, 2 times down. There was a double descent. Like Hashem promises Yaakov that I'm going to go up with you. He says 2 times Ella, 2 times I'm going to go up. So it was the Ma'od, the power, the hidden worlds of watchful eyes, so to say, Hashkach of Hashem, and the revealed Hashkach of Hashem, they let the Jewish people survive the double descent and then be able to have a double elevation. So what do we see from all this? The fact that the Torah tells us before even we know that there's a new Pharaoh or new laws, according to the different opinions of Rashi, quotes from the Talmud, and the death of the Yaakov and his sons and Yosef, and starts the Shibud. Before all that, we learned that the Jewish people had Ma'od, meaning to say, the Rebbe is emphasizing that there's the refuah, there's the healing, there's the ability to survive before something goes bad. Like even in Egypt, there were 7 good years and then the 7 bad years. So that gives the person the strength to get through the difficult challenges of life. Not only are we learning about the exile and the beginning of the exile, we're learning about how God positioned the Jewish people to be able to survive the Galus, the refuah, the remedy, the healing, that we could go through the Galus, which is emphasized in the last 2 parshas, the Ma'od, that the Tov that Yaakov had in Egypt, and then the pasuk Ma'od, 2 times Ma'od, which we know emphasizes the strong ability of positive. As a Galus Viserim are more than that. The Natzel as a Galus. Again, the Rebbe always emphasizes it's not just that we're not here to survive things. We're here to take advantage. The word Natzel means to take advantage of Galus. Mitzrayim. Because there's certain things, like the Rebbe said, that you could only achieve through difficult times, through Galus, and the idea is not to survive it, but to take advantage and to thrive in Galus. And the Rebbe says, based on what's known, we know that the stories of Torah are not just stories of once upon a time that things happened. Torah is a lesson. Torah means that we have to learn from it today, presently, 5,786, 2026. We have to learn today from the story from what happened in Mitzrayim. Avodas Adam in our own personal service. Kedisa Bizarre, as the Zohar says, Yesh Levaras Hayrab Avodas Adam Kamar Liel. So how do we understand the lesson? What's the lesson for us today? So Rebbe says like this: you do what's known. Shekol hagal yisheim bedugmas galas Mitzrayim. We know that Mitzrayim was not only the first of the enslavements or of the exiles, but also all exiles follow the pattern of how things were in Egypt. Just like like we said before, that in Mitzrayim there was the refuah, there was the healing, there was the remedy before the makkah, before the enslavement. That there was the multiple physical of the Jews, and they also had the idea of ma'oid, the almid iskalim, the almid iskasi. They had the hidden worlds and the revealed worlds. There was no place in Egypt that wasn't infiltrated by the Jews. And it was all beyond nature. All of a sudden they sold a house and then came in a family of 12 kids. That wasn't regular in Egypt. And this was empowering for the Jewish people. Like we said before, that they should get through the Galus of the fact that there was solid roots, big numbers all over the place in Egypt. You have to remember, this is a talk from the Rebbe in the year 1956, not even just about 10 years after the Holocaust, when 6 million of our people were murdered. And the Rebbe was one of those who supported large Jewish families. Very much so. The Rebbe emphasized it very strongly. So this is one of the talks that's talking about that we have to have large families. So the Rebbe says, "Kein gam begalasu," so too in our galus. The Rebbe says, notwithstanding to the fact that we're living in a double darkened time. Why is it called double dark? Because it's so dark we don't even realize how dark it is. The Rebbe says, don't get overwhelmed by this. Yesh ladas, we have to know, the world has to be filled with Jews. There shouldn't be a place in the exile. Not spiritually or physically. That shouldn't be totally penetrated with existence and Judaism, Jews and Judaism. Even if it's beyond nature. As it was in Egypt. And just like in Egypt, this was how the Jewish people were able to go to Torah, was by Yirbu, Yishusu, Ma'oid, multiplying, and that saved the Jewish people to be able to get through the Galus, and through that to be able to reach Matan Torah. Kach gam Galus zu, so too in this exile. We are not just in Galus, we're in the preparation for the revelations of the future, of the times of Mashiach. As the Alter Rebbe explains in the Mittler Rebbe's Torah on this week's parsha, that what's going to happen with the Geula, that's our present Geula, and the coming of Mashiach is levels of revelation much greater than the revelations that were in Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. That happened through being and then leaving Egypt, like the pasuk, like the verse says, just like when you left Egypt. So too, when you leave this galus, this exile, arenu niflais, I'm going to show you wonders. Nun plais, niflais means nun plais. You could say that's 50 times of wonders. We know that up until in Matan Torah we reached the 49th gate. The 49th gate, they were able to count 49 days. They couldn't count the 50th date. Mashiach comes, we're going to reach the 50th gate of knowledge. We know that in Matan Torah we only revealed the 49 gates. Therefore, we count the Omer, which was a preparation for the receiving of the Torah. We count Mem Tes Yamim, only 49 days. Because they only had to get ready for the 49 gates. When Mashiach comes, Yisgala, it's going to be revealed. Gam Shar Hanun, the 50th gate. The 50th gate is not just one more gate. It's a whole nother level. What is the 50th gate? The essence of God. When we recognize what's going to be the great revelation when Mashiach comes, hopefully speedily in our time. And the Galus, the exile we are now, presently, is a preparation for this great revelation. The Rebbe says in Yiddish, we know with what we're dealing with, meaning to say with the essence of God. Im inyan hachamishim, with the 50th gate. Atzimus mahu sein tzayif baruch hu, the essence of God. So we don't get overwhelmed. It's clear. We're not allowed to get overwhelmed with any of the obstacles and any of the concealments. Because we know because we've been empowered. Just like in Galus Mitzrayim, the God prepared the Jewish people to be able to survive the Galus and thrive in the Galus. So too, we have to know we're not going to get overwhelmed by the Galus. God prepared us and empowered us to get through the Galus in a way of thriving. Laver as koishia Galus, to get through the difficulties of the Galus. We filled the world with Jews, and we should merit to see the wonders. And may the covet of Hashem be revealed, and everyone will see together. That everything that we see and that's around us is the word of God. After that, the Rebbe said the Maimer of Eile Shemos, and the Rebbe continues the Farbrengen. It says over here in footnote number 22 that the continuation of this talk is edited and brought down in the Sicha, volume 2, page 487. The Rebbe says like this: Parshas Shemos, this parsha that we're learning now. We start to learn about, like we said before, about the exile. The Torah tells us that they made the lives of the Jewish people bitter. With hard labor, that they had to carry the bricks and the mortar. Avodas perach, which was done in a way of enslavement. Perach is hard work. Say the Shiva the Galus, what? How did it work? The Rebbe said that how did the Galus start? First, the Jewish people started to compromise. The Vatim means to compromise slowly on their spiritual Torah, on their spiritual life. And they started to give in to what the Egyptians wanted them to change themselves, to change their way of living. And when they started to listen to the social pressures of the spiritual decline of the Jewish people, that brought to the physical decline of the shibud of the enslavement. The beginning was, the Rebbe says, they made their lives bitter. The Koyal Torah, what's the life of a Yid? Chayehem, their life. The life of a Yid is Torah. What is the life of a Jewish person? It wasn't that they told them they can't join the country club, or they said no more Jews in the public areas. Chayehem means a life. What's the life of a Jew? The life of a Jew is Torah. So they made the life of a Torah life difficult. And after they gave in to the spiritual pressures, the Egyptians wanted the Jewish people no longer to be a spiritual people. Now, this caused the physical decline. To literally start schlepping and stones and mortar, bricks and mortar. The book Panim Yafes tells us, the Rebbe says, the reason that we know that all the tribes of the 12 tribes of Yaakov, of the 12 sons of Yaakov, and Ephraim and Menashe were all part of the enslavement, even Yosef's children. The only tribe that was exempt from enslavement was the tribe of Levi. How did it work out like that? How did it come out that Levi, we see Aaron was able to come and go. Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't told by Paro to start schlepping. So how was it that the tribe of Levi weren't enslaved? So the Panim Yafa says, Kedivrei Paro, we see clearly, Paro says, L'chu l'siv le'seichem, go to your jobs. What were their jobs? The jobs wasn't slaves. They had other things that they did. They taught Torah. Shekivan sheshevet Levi le'hoyo mishubed le'paroi. Levi, the tribe of Levi, were never part of the enslavement. They did their own things. Go do whatever you're doing. What are you bothering the Jews for? They're my slaves. Because the tribe of Levi were not enslaved. From the verse that we see about Levi, that Moshe's blessing, that what's Tomecha mean? That he kept the tribe of Levi, unlike the other 12 tribes. They kept this thing that was unique to the Jewish people, like we learned in Parshas Vayishlach, right? The Shem and Chamor, that he says we don't have to do with people that don't circumcise themselves. The only tribe that kept the tradition from Avram was the tribe of Levi. V'urecha koy al Torah, and the Urecha is the Torah. That the Urecha v'tumecha v'urecha l'Ish Chasidecha is referring to the tribe of Levi that kept Torah and kept Milah. Shehem hayu shevet Levi shebehem hayu shevet Levi b'shleimus. That the tribe of Levi were complete, everyone. kept to the Torah and kept to the mitzvah of circumcision. Gam b'shas Exile, even in the times of the enslavement. Because they didn't give in to the ruchnius, because they didn't allow Paroi to affect their ruchnius, their spiritual, they weren't affected by Gashmias. They did fall for the decrees that said stop circumcising himself, close the yeshivas. That trickled down to being able that Paroi should enslave them physically. He couldn't enslave them as long as they kept to Torah and to Milah, to the mitzvahs. The Rebbe says one could ask the question. They were obligated to circumcision, so it was taka, a big yerida. It was a big descent that they stopped circumcising their children, because Avram was told that all your descendants have to circumcise. But other things of Torah, the Jewish people didn't receive the Torah yet; they weren't obligated to keep the Torah. We're talking about before the giving of the Torah. And when it comes to self-sacrifice, where the Egyptians were forbidding to do circumcision and studying Torah, we don't even know. There's a question if they were obligated to go self-sacrifice for the mitzvahs. We know that the part of the requirements of the 7 Noahide laws is not that you have to go self-sacrifice even for the 7 Noahide laws. And therefore, the Jewish people at the time, there's an opinion that they weren't any different besides extra laws. But fundamentally, they had the obligation of the 7 Noahide laws. And the Rebbe discusses this in many issues in Sefer Bereshis. For instance, Yaakov's marrying 2 sisters because the commitment he had to give, that he gave to Rachel, overrides as the Torah law of not marrying 2 sisters, because he had an obligation according to the 7 Noahide laws to Rachel, etc. So what do you want from them? How could you say, so to say, that it was a punishment? That because they didn't keep Milah, they didn't keep circumcision, and they didn't have self-sacrifice for circumcision, that they got punished and they went into enslavement. They had no obligation to go self-sacrifice for the mitzvahs. There was no Torah then. The Bnei Noach don't have an obligation for Mesiras Nefesh. So what's the answer? The Rebbe says, Vayramiza. The lesson to us is, Shekasher Meduber Oidis Ruchnis. When we're talking about not specifics, we're not talking about don't do this or don't do that. We're talking about your spiritual well-being. We're talking about ruchnius. It's not always the time to check the letter of the law to see, am I obligated to go self-sacrifice or we're not obligated to go self-sacrifice? It's not only the details. You don't even have to check if the whole law applies in this case. Maybe there's no even law here. Maybe the whole thing that we're talking about is just a custom. It's not even like a mitzvah that the question is, do I have an obligation to do it? The whole thing under discussion is just a custom. The Rebbe is leading into something, let's say a custom of the Rebbe. A Rebbe Shlefanav, or the Rebbe before him. Because the sons of Levi didn't ask these questions. They didn't say, what's the halacha in my 7 Noahide laws? Do I have to Mesiras Nefesh? Our father Avram was told to do Milah, we're doing Milah. We're not asking any questions. The Rebbe says when it comes to a spiritual well-being, it's not always the time to get into the letter of the law. If someone's coming to corrupt the spiritual well-being of the Jewish people, then you go Mesiras Nefesh without asking any questions. When we have a question about the spiritual well-being of the Klal Yisrael, when we see that there's a gzeira, someone's coming to pass a law or to pass a resolution that says you shouldn't be spiritual at this moment, and you see that the point of it all is to affect the spiritual well-being of the Jewish people, you don't ask any questions, and you say, no, I'm not compromising. Don't open up the book and show me this and don't show me that. You're trying to corrupt my spiritual well-being. I'm not listening. Okay, the footnotes we'll learn a little later. Why is this? A Jew has to know that your physical well-being, your material well-being is dependent on your spiritual well-being. And when this is the key to not just to taking you down spiritually. This is the key to take down the physical and spiritual of the Jewish people. If you're going to give in to the spiritual decrees and corruptions that people want to say, America's different, time to blend in. When you start to give in to the pressures spiritually, it's going to affect your physical well-being, like it happened in Egypt. Well, on the contrary, if a person says, I'm not listening, I know what's going on over here, you're trying to corrupt my spiritual well-being. Pari knows he has nothing to do with you. He can't touch you. He tells Moshe and Aaron, go to your jobs, whatever those jobs are. It's not important to me. You're not my people. Because you don't give in to me spiritually, therefore I have nothing to do with you physically. Pari himself acknowledges. Go to whatever you do, but you're not my slaves. Look, think about it, the Rebbe says. Pari ruled the world. Yosef set it up so that Pari became the world leader. He had very strong powers. He could have done whatever he wanted. And that we know that the Medrash brings down that the power of Pari himself was intimidating to Moshe. God had to tell him, let's go together to Pari. Why? Because he was a Tani Nagadol, the great serpent, not just a physical. He was a tremendous power that Pari had, both also in a kind of spiritual sense. And God had to tell him, Boya Pari, I'm coming with you. Don't be intimidated by Pari. How is it taka? If Pari was so powerful, who cares if Levi didn't want to become slaves and didn't give in to a day for Paro, or is kept circumcising their sons and learning Torah? Paro could have forced them to change their reality. Why was he intimidated by the tribe of Levi? He surely was able to control things in his own country. He ruled the world. Egypt was such a place that no one could ever leave. It was impossible to leave Egypt. But nevertheless, because Levi did not give in, the tribe of Levi did not give in spiritually, he had nothing to do with Levi. He had no opinion on them. He couldn't tell them what to do. And the Rebbe says, Sipur HaTorah Hemeirah B'Avodas Adam. This has to be a lesson to everyone. Isa Beramam, the Rambam teaches us. The Maimonides, which is actually good that we're mentioning the Rambam tonight, is Yortzeit. Chav Teves is the Yortzeit of the Rambam. He was born on the 14th of Nisan, and he passed away on the 20th of Teves. Shekol Mish Nidva Liba Lisharas Savaya. The Rambam tells us that's not just the tribe of Levi, but anyone who makes the decision to donate, so Nidva Liba, to give over from their heart to serve God. You could also be like a Levi. Doesn't mean you could take my aliyah from me, but you have other benefits of the tribe of Levi. Yes, one of the things about Levi is you don't have a portion of the land. Levi did not get any part of the land. There's no part of the land that could be claimed by Levi besides the cities of Levi, but they don't have the same ownership like the tribes' lands of Eretz Yisrael. But God is their inheritance. And this affects not just the spiritual, but also the material. The Rebbe says all the Jewish people must know. You have the ability to be like the tribe of Levi. When someone comes against you, Menagid means someone who's against you, that wants to be mevalvel, wants to confuse you, umafriya, to interrupt you in your avodas Hashem, in your service of God, whether it's with kind words, with harsh words. The Yetzer Hara has many tactics. Don't think that if you give in a little bit, you'll appease them. The person will start, or the energy or the narrative will stop confusing you. It's the opposite. If you give in a little bit, you give a finger, they're going to want a hand. They're going to start confusing. They have a fish. They caught someone. They're going to start putting the pressure on, intensifying the pressure. It's not going to relieve the pressure. It's not going to only affect your spiritual well-being, it's going to start affecting your gashmis, just like it happened in Egypt. If you give up to something on your spiritual well-being, you make you're mevater, you give in, you compromise a little bit. When you allow the people to start making bitter your Torah life, chayim is the life of a Yiddish Torah. It's not going to take too long, it's going to happen quite fast. That the next thing you know, you're schlepping bricks. Well, the Idach Yisrael, on the contrary, just like the tribe of Levi, and the Rambam says everyone could be like the tribe of Levi. It's a mindset. It's not just an inherent right that you were born to the tribe. If you don't give in at all, you don't give an inch to the pressure, to the confusing narrative. I'm a ish chasidecha, which is the tribe of Levi, and therefore my Torah and my milah, my mitzvahs are complete. That's how you get rid of the Galus. You don't allow the Galus to take hold of you. And Parag, notwithstanding of how powerful he was, there was no. If you look at it, there was no angle for Levi to escape from. They were in the middle of this. They were in the eye of the storm. It still couldn't touch them. The shlipa has no hand on you. Not only can't he touch your spirituality, it's also your physical well-being. Although seemingly in the darkness of the Galus we have to give in, we have to compromise on certain things. There's certain things that are out of our control. With the Galus came the destruction of the temple, and in the destruction of the temple we lost a lot of our mitzvahs. The Jewish people today are not performing a majority of the mitzvahs because these are mitzvahs atluis ba'aretz, and also mitzvahs that are depending on how the Jewish people live in Eretz Yisrael in the time of when there's the laws of Tumat Torah and other laws that are biblical that only take into effect when there's certain conditions of either majority in Eretz Yisrael or the Beis Hamikdash is standing. It's not about we dropped off 40, 50, 70% of the mitzvahs because the load is too heavy and we're just trying to survive now. This is all a preparation for something much greater, which is the revelations of Mashiach. Like it says, Kosis Lamor, that if you want to get to the Mor, to the luminary, we have to go through Kosis. Kosis means a squeezing. You want to get the oil out of the olive, you have to crush the olive. There's a rabbis have taught us, the Jewish people are like an olive. Just like an olive. When you crush it, you get its oil. The more you crush the Jewish people, you get to the oil, the essence, which is the crushing of Galus, brings us to the Geula, to the oil of Mashiach. Just like Mitzrayim was the preparation for the giving of the Torah, that's how it was in Egypt, and so too in our Galus, in our exile. In the time of Egypt, after Egypt, we got the revealed Torah, the 10 Commandments and the Torah Shebal Peh. And what's coming now with Mashiach is Legili Hamor Atzmai. We're not going to get the oil, but the luminary itself, the Mor, the source of light. Hamor Shebetorah Kosis Lamor She'inyan Zehu Aidei Pnimis HaTorah. And how we're going to get to the sources through the secrets of Torah, Chassidus, Kabbalah. And now is the time to be strong, not to compromise on any details. We know, yes, we are in Galus. The Geula has not started. And it's because we're in Galus and not in Eretz Yisrael yet the way it should be, because that's what Hashem wanted. That you could still be in the fat of the land. It's up to you, the Rebbe says. The Rebbe is talking very strong words, very, very broad words. I mean, the Chrayis, the Rebbe is saying in saying this, that yes, you're in Galus, you're not in Eretz Yisrael. Even if you're in Eretz Yisrael, you're not in Eretz Yisrael the way you should be with Mashiach. You could eat chaylev aretz, you could eat the fat of the land, but then how do you be part of the fat of the land? Is when you don't give in to the shibud. You're the tribe of Levi. You don't compromise on your spiritual well-being, and then you won't have any shibud. You won't have any enslavement. The Rebbe says, although we were talking until now in a collective sense, that how the Jewish people are in Galus, a person has to look at this in their own individual life. If a person thinks, how could you expect me to take on certain restrictions or certain difficulties in Torah mitzvahs? And the person may think, if I give into certain difficult things of my performance, my own personal performance of Torah mitzvahs, it'll make things easier. Whatever those compromises are, Each person knows what they compromise in their Torah mitzvahs, and they argue. That'll make it easier for me, both in my physical well-being, in my material well-being, and also my spirituality will benefit from it. Because this thing is sitting on me, and it's confusing me. Allah Ladas, you have to know. This is absolutely the opposite. This compromise that you're about to make, nasa matzav geruya, he says, like in every situation, it's going to make it worse. It's not going to make your spiritual well-being better, and it's definitely not going to make your material well-being better. By holding strong and having inner self-sacrifice, even if it's just a custom. If you don't compromise, it's a mindset. If you have a mindset of geula, of redemption, there's no pressure, inside or outside, that's going to stop me from being on top of my game in Torah mitzvahs. And if you think that by compromising a little bit, whether things that you're struggling within yourself or from pressures of the outside, you're going to be able to get through the Galus easier, and not only that, it's going to benefit spiritually. The Rebbe says it's not the fact. It doesn't work like that. And the same thing applies to our relationship to others. The Rebbe says, we know that all the Jewish people are partners, and we're guarantors to each other. It's not enough to take care of yourself. You have to look out for others. And especially if you're a person that has community responsibilities. That's your job to deal with the community. Sometimes you're lacking time. You don't have enough time. Or you just feel tired. You have no energy. Or merits, which is another vigor. You may think, the Rebbe again, this is 1956. The Rebbe's coming on full pressure on the gas. The Rebbe says, you may be tired. You're a person in community. Maybe you have to relax a little bit. And if I relax, I'll be able to give more of myself because I'll be more relaxed. Cut down a few things. Allah Ladas, the Rebbe says, you have to know sorry, the Rebbe is not subscribing to that. It's the opposite. If you start slowing down, things are not going to get easier and get harder. Don't give in. Don't compromise. You can see things are going to get easier. This is a confusing energy. Obviously, we're not talking about extreme situations. We're talking about if a person thinks that compromise a little here, compromise a little there, take a little vacation, more, only give time once a week, twice a week. No, the Rebbe says that's just going to get worse and worse. Because the Rebbe says I'm not just talking about the law, but even things that you have to keep that are hidurim, that are extras. If that's something that you took on upon yourself. If you took on to yourself an extra hidur, you can't say, okay, that was when I was younger, but now, I don't want to be so careful in the kind of meat I eat or chav yisrael or other things. The Rebbe says, no. You have to go ad mesir nefesh, no compromise, even if it demands inner self-sacrifice. You have a few minutes. The Rebbe says, we know the story, the example as people tell. You have a boat that's about to sink. The sailors say, we got to throw off the weights. There's too much luggage on the boat. So the people thought on the boat, what's the first thing I'm going to throw off the boat? My talis and tefillin. That goes first into the sea. Then I'll throw, my stones or my weights or my suitcases that have my clothing in it. First, my talis and tefillin will see if the boat still is sinking. I'll throw the rest. But first, let me get rid of my spiritual things. Life is like a ship in crazy waters. You have a storm, stormy waters. You're thinking you're about to sink. Don't think that if your life is a storm, I'm not talking about a storm, it's also, you could be living in a nice house and on a nice block, and everything's quiet, and the garbage gets picked up. But what's really going on in your life is a storm. And what are you going to think? What's the first thing I have to throw off the boat? Is my talis and tefillin. Stop going to shul. Stop davening. The Rebbe says, obviously, that doesn't make any sense. Umuvin. A person may think, okay, of course, I would not throw my Rashi's tefillin into the sea. But even if you took upon yourself the extra of putting on a tefillin on Rabbeinu Tam, the Rebbe says, those who put down those 4 pairs of tefillin, you don't think that, okay, now I can't do this hijra anymore. If life becomes chaotic, a person may think, okay, when things were calm, I was able to be more strict on myself and take on extra stuff. But now that things are a little chaotic, I have to drop things. This is absolutely not. I was going to continue, obviously, along this line to strengthen people, to have the koyach to continue. We have to end here. I wish everyone a good Shabbos. The message is obvious and I have to self-explanatory. And Bez Hashem, see you all. We have again the Matzah Shabbos class in Hilchos Tefillah. Some fantastic stories of the Baal Shem Tov. Ba'al Tov, everyone, and good Shabbos. Thank you for joining.
Good Shabbos, Rabbi. Thank you.